So my name is Lora Cecere, and I am the founder of Supply Chain Insights, and it's my goal to redefine the analyst industry. I've been an industry analyst for 10 years, and today I want to talk a little bit about what I'm doing and how I hope to impact the industry and the changes I'd like to make. So, first of all, this is my PowerPoint. I wanted to smack you in the face for a reason, because what I'm doing is really going back and looking at why supply chain matters. I have a book that's going to publish in August this year, and I'm very excited about it. 98,000 words is a lot harder to do than it is to say. And in fact, I'm happy to tell you that at this conference, I finished this book. And this is my manuscript, appropriately in a pink folder, don't you think? And I want to tell you a little bit about writing the book, because I think it's a useful story. I worked at AMR Research with Steve for 6 years, and prior to that, I was an analyst for Gartner for 2. And I went to work for a company called Altimeter Group, which was trying to redefine the analyst model. So I thought everybody would like to hear about supply chain and a book on supply chain. So I did a proposal and I shopped it around. And you know what I heard was, can you ever write this book and not use the term supply chain? Because people will think supply chain is so boring. Do you think about that? I got that from 5 publishers. The term supply chain would be so boring. So you'll notice that the title does not have the term supply chain in it. It's deliberate. Bricks matter. And I think one of the challenges for us is to take supply chain to a higher level, because I believe that the best supply chains have a connection to business strategy and make business strategy effective. And I think so many times we get tied into our geek speak and our project terms that our line of business leaders don't know what we're speaking about. And many of those people that are sitting at the table have never taken a class in supply chain management. And only 6% of Fortune 500 have anyone that sits at the director level that has had a supply chain management course. So the book is titled Bricks Matter. And there are 3 forms of bricks that I find matter. One is the natural brick that you would think about, which is asset strategies and how we design supply chain. The second was how our 4 generations of supply chain leaders put boots on the ground to really evolve brick country and global strategies. And the third is the evolution of supply chain processes and the focus on supply chain excellence. And so the book is about those 3 forms of bricks. Now, it's a celebration because 2012 is the 30th anniversary of the first time supply chain management ever appeared in the press. Sometimes it was used for logistics or military, but the first time that it appeared in the press focused on commercial manufacturing and distribution processes. So it's 30th anniversary, and I believe bricks matter. The other thing is, notice that it's building market-driven differentiation. The term market-driven is not trivial. For 8 years, I have written about the term demand-driven. And hopefully you know by now that demand-driven means that you have near zero latency to sense demand, shape demand, and drive a profitable demand response. It requires good capabilities on demand translation and demand orchestration. But I believe demand-driven is insufficient. And the reason I believe that is, as we look at the evolution of supply chain practices and corporate social responsibility and the scarcity of materials, I believe that it's essential to be market-driven, which is the definition of outside-in processes to connect companies market to market, buy side to sell side. I think that one of our issues is we have never built strong enough horizontal processes to translate demand into sourcing strategies and have bidirectional processes and what I call demand orchestration and demand translation. And so you'll see a lot about that in the book. So I'm excited. It's coming out in August. It actually has a number. You can pre-order it on Amazon. And I want to talk a little bit about what I did to get ready for the book. And some people in this room actually were gracious enough to do interviews, and I appreciate that very much. But the book is built on the premise that supply chains are a complex system built on complex processes with increasing complexity. We have 4 generations of supply chain pioneers. The first pioneers were engineers. They primarily came out of manufacturing and procurement, and they understood the concepts of complex systems. But as they built complex processes, they had difficulty having the system side of supply chain understood by businesses, primarily financial and sales, that only understood it as a complex process. And one of our challenges as supply chains mature is this issue around complex systems and the trade-offs between customer service, forecast accuracy, inventory, and cost, and how we have to build the effective frontier to really help people to understand that they're trade-offs. The increasing complexity in our business is what you see a lot of writing about. But what I think is really not understood is the complex system. And one of the things that bothers me that's happening right now in the 4th generation of pioneers that are primarily coming out of business schools is a lack of understanding of the complex system. And so the book does a lot of writing about that and gives you a lot of insights. Now, one of the things that I asked in the interviews, and I interviewed 75 pioneers, is who does supply chain best? And the interviews would go along like this. Who does supply chain best? Long silence. And then they'd say, well, you know, Toyota did a good job on lean, or Dell did a good job on working capital, or Caterpillar did a good job on maintenance and repair. So pieces of the supply chain. But then I would say, if you had to name one leader, who did supply chain best? And you can see that 38% of the pioneers said Procter & Gamble, then Apple, then Dell, and then Walmart, and then you see that Toyota. So one of the issues is we lack a lightning rod, someone that clearly defines supply chain excellence so people understand it. I also do not believe that you can put all companies in a spreadsheet, shake them up, and give a best answer. I think you have to compare industries amongst peer groups, and I think you've got to look at supply chain performance for multiple years. One of the quotes in the book by one of the pioneers is that you cannot effectively impact supply chain performance in less than 3 years. And I do think there's a lot of truth to that. You know, as I look at year-over-year performance, I've been at this conference for 3 years. I've worked with many of you for 6, 7 years. This does not happen overnight. The other thing I asked was, what were the major tipping points over the course of these 30 years? And also, I mean, there's such a confluence of tipping points, that things that happened. And number 1 was technology, followed by globalization and transportation, but they're very, very tightly linked. And as we looked at the infographic of what the pioneers thought were the major tipping points over the 30 years, and this was very useful for me to remember because I grew up in manufacturing with my safety shoes and my hard hat, really writing letters and interoffice mail, getting information from my Philippine plants on telex, going to my office to do a phone. You know, so much has changed. And as we look at the evolution of the processes from the islands of automation to the vertical organizations and getting ready for Y2K, we designed a lot of projects and technologies that really need to be re-implemented. And as we look at the evolution of Lean Six Sigma, demand-driven, corporate social responsibility, and now what I call market-driven, we're really starting to define processes outside in. And it requires the redefinition of what we built that was inside out. And requires the definition of horizontal processes, not just strong vertical processes. And so in the book, I have a definition of market-driven, which really talks about how do we build these horizontal connectors that allow us to sense, shape, and respond against the business strategy market to market. And I think the evolution of sourcing strategies in these horizontal processes is what's going to define the future of supply chain management. So enough about that. Another thing that I did was I went back through 20 years of history by peer group and looked at industries, because I do not believe you can put companies in a spreadsheet and compare a high-tech company to a chemical company. The value in the value network is just too different. So I looked at companies, and if I look at peer groups, consumer products actually showed one of the greatest impacts of what I call supply chain excellence. And so I looked at revenue per employee. And if you look at Procter & Gamble's time, about the time of customer-driven value networks and open innovation, you can see the gap here that happened. And if you look at earnings before interest and taxes, one of the things that I think is really important is you also see continuity of that particular curve. Now, when I wrote this on the blog, which I hope all of you read my blog, I've got 5,000 readers. I write in front of the firewall at www.shaman.com. I got a nasty letter from Colgate that said, "We are convinced that you love Procter & Gamble best," right? I'm like, numbers don't lie. If you look at continuity of earnings here for Colgate, there was an issue. But the other thing is this whole issue of complex system. You know, if you look at the ability of Procter & Gamble versus Unilever, which were very different organizational structures, and the ability to not only drive revenue per employee and consistency in earnings, but the ability year over year to manage inventory. That's what I think supply chain excellence is about. It's about the ability to manage this complex system, forecast, customer service, inventory, revenue per employee, growth, year over year. And as we look at the maturity, one of the things that I see in the data is that one of the biggest impacts happens on the cost of sales, the reduction of cost of sales, which I think is really ironic because sales has never been supply chain's best friend. But, you know, as you look at the data, there is a correlation between supply chain maturity and the declining cost of sales. Now, I am getting ready to build a supply chain community. And I'll invite all of you to be my best friends on this community. It's free and open for everyone, and we'll have all of this data, and I am doing quantitative studies where I will link by primary key the quantitative data to the financial data, because I think we do not have enough data-driven research in the market. So where are we headed? You know, do you remember this guy? I don't kind of look like him, but this is my view on the future. I think we're building structured and unstructured systems with rules-based ontologies and predictive analytics that will take us to learning systems. And this evolution of technologies on top of big data, outside in, I think will be extremely exciting because as we look at the evolution of supply chains, and one of the things I'd like for you to think about is all of the data in unstructured data forms that can actually help you build these outside-in processes. I'm very excited about sensor data, RFID on pallets, streaming data, what happens with streaming data with geolocation, what happens with digital path to purchase when we can get videos from stores, what happens as we are able to combine all of this data, because it's the volume, the velocity, and the variety of data that can come together that can help us define these processes. And I think how we're thinking about today's architectures, we need to stop and think about a couple things. Is it outside in? Does it use all of the available forms of data that we have today? Does the supply chain processes, do they tie together to really deliver the business strategy? So as I look at the evolution of supply chain excellence, in the early days, back when I wore safety shoes, it was about the efficient supply chain. It was the lowest cost. And then we learned because it's a complex system, we can't have the lowest cost without reliability. And we introduced the concepts of right product, right place, right time. And then we said, oh, but I can't sense. And in fact, most of the supply chains today respond, they don't sense. And so a lot of the work you're doing around demand sensing and a lot of the work that's happening in procurement on supplier sensing is about the reliable supply chain, the start of the evolution of outside in. And then as I look at adaptation, the ability to shape, to use predictive analytics to shape, whether it's demand shaping or supply shaping on the orchestration side, to really be able to adapt. But I believe market-driven really comes from building unique differentiation in horizontal processes, which I believe are revenue management, sales and operations planning, supplier development, corporate social responsibility, and the ability to connect those together. But more importantly, I believe that in our lifetime, the fourth generation of supply chain pioneers will have learning systems where they test and learn, and where these systems have the ability to learn through new forms of predictive analytics will happen on top of big data. And the other thing is, I believe that we will orchestrate these processes outside in, buy side to sell side market. So it'll cause us to have to rethink processes. And in fact, one of the issues is how we implemented demand planning will have to change to be outside in. And so one of the issues is we'll have discontinuity in processes. This is S&OP, where we have to go back and we have to re-implement the old things because the data models are wrong. And I think thinking about the data models and thinking about the goals of the original projects, of all the stuff that we implemented when we got ready for Y2K is an important thing. So our processes won't be just ERP to ERP. Instead, what we're going to see is we're going to see the evolution of demand signal repositories with supplier repositories. We're going to see the implementation of systems that are systems of record between organizations, because we really do not have good systems of record today. We're going to see the evolution of a collaborative layer. You see this now in StreamWorks or SAP. You may have it with your enterprise collaboration tools with Yammer or StreamWorks. And we will see the transactional applications. But it won't be transactional application to transactional application. It's going to be a very data-driven world based upon new forms of what if, matching multiple ifs to multiple thens with a higher level of data dependency. So I'm going to close with a couple of comments, right? As you think about where you're at today. I think that in the old days, we tried to get very precise on imprecise data, and we wasted a lot of time. I think it isn't the definition of dead nuts forecast accuracy that's as important as embracing the probability of demand and designing for that. If I look at all the wasted time of taking specific numbers and pumping them into spreadsheets and going to the 13th significant digit, I'm like, what a waste of time. But instead, we never design networks to look at the probability of demand and what-if analysis to do that. So I think we cannot get perfect on precise on imperfect data. And I think we have to educate all people that the most efficient supply chain is not the most effective supply chain, and start re-implanting in their minds this idea of a complex system where we don't look at pieces of the supply chain in isolation, where we look at the effective frontier and we build the potential of the supply chain to raise that frontier, and we help people to see trade-offs. I think we wrongly define the R's as a supply chain. We have no relationship in CRM. We have no relationship in SRM. Those are all transactional tools. ERP really didn't have much planning. And so as we look at the redefinition of those technologies, it's about more than right product, right place, right time. And we've got to rethink those traditional technologies against the goal, and we've got to look at the data model against our business strategy. Because I think it's how we focus outside in, to sense, to shape, to learn, and how we redefine those processes. You know, what Stoffs was showing you, I don't like the term MRO, But what Stas was showing you about outside-in demand pulls and the need to use that demand data, think about all the VMI systems we put in that go nowhere, that were bridges to nowhere. We have the ability to have a bridge to somewhere. That's really important. It's our customer. We've never had the ability to listen to our customer before. And as we think about how we do this, one of the things I hope you build an understanding of is our supply chain systems today, because of the first generation of pioneers coming from manufacturing, reward the urgent, not the important. And if I look at the data about who eclipsed who on the 20 years of financial data, they rewarded the important. And the important is supply chain strategy. Only 6% of companies have a good supply chain strategy. They rewarded planning. They rewarded top-to-top meetings and relationship development. And they focused on the definition of what's important. And, you know, today we respond without sensing. I would love to see you invest in how we listen before we respond. So, look for my book. You can pre-order it from Amazon. Please come join my community. It'll be open to all in June. It will have things like financial data, benchmarking of services. It'll have job postings, average salaries, and very important, it will have ratings and reviews for all technologies and consulting partners. So just like Expedia.com, when you want to know how good a hotel is, you can come to my community and you can look at the latest release of perhaps SAP HANA Demand Signal Management or perhaps Terra's latest release, and you can see user-based content. It is my goal to return and redefine the analyst model to the user. And I would love your support by joining the community. I write in front of the firewall on a blog, and I'm starting to publish reports again. They'll publish in front of the firewall. I appreciate you being here and listening. Any questions?